Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters 409. We got a full house tonight, and we're going to get to everyone. But first, we're going to do our little intro to get things started.
This one goes out to the Artcasters. Ooh, Artcasters! I say you're casting your spell, Artcasters. Casting your spell. Ooh, you're gonna cast that spell. Strike of hell! Whoa! Ooh! Aye, aye. Aye, aye. Aye, aye.
That's right.
All right. That never gets old.
Awesome.
That was Axel from like 1997, apparently.
Yeah, that's like it was almost T2 era.
I was swaying to it. I just couldn't help it.
Yeah.
It's amazing you guys even know him. That's crazy.
Yeah. We had to pull a few strings, but we made it happen. All right. So we like you can probably tell, we've got a packed house because we are going to be covering. Four of us went to the Arizona Comicbook Art Fest, and we're going to kind of share our experience. It's kind of a unique con in that. I wish we had more cons like this, but this one is very much focused just on comic books. So kind of an important con, and it's something it's only in the second year. So it's something we want to see succeed and continue. And hopefully more of these will pop up in different areas because, although the big pop culture comic conventions are fun, I like going to them for all the reasons that they are, but we kind of moved away from comics. So I want to see also, in addition to those big pop culture cons, I want to see some comic focused events. So we did the four of us attended the show. And then, and of course, Corey and Josh, if you guys have any questions, just chime in and let us know. But before we do that, we're going to go around the virtual room here. We'll try to make it kind of quick because we do have so many people on, and just promote what we got going on. So for me, I have a website, circworks.com, where you can find my comic book, Young and the Dead. It's a kids versus zombie adventure story. I also have digital products that will help you create comic books and prints and things like that. I also have a YouTube channel. Well, you're on my YouTube channel. So when you're done watching this video, check out some of the other stuff I'm doing. I've got a whole backlog of how to make comics type content. But recently I'm doing something new where I take nostalgia, ephemera, stuff like crazy stuff from the past that you would order from the back of a comic book, and those types of things. And I look at it, reverse engineer it, and try to recreate it and put my own spin on it. So that's what I'm doing. Corey, what about you?
You can check out my stuff at CoreyKerr.com. If you go to CoreyKerr.com/email, you can get on my email newsletter. And if you haven't yet, go check out the video that I did on contrast. This is a university level kind of like deep dive into the most important different ways that you can contrast things visually to control the eye of the viewer. So check that out. It is, I'm not exaggerating when I say university level. I'm actually using this video in classes that I'm teaching. So go check that out. All
right, Josh.
Awesome. All of these comments are really affecting my conscience. Anyhow, so you can check out Indie Comics 2 Stories, which is an autobiographical comic that talks about faith and mental illness. That's hand-lettered, hand-inked, and handed to you in print everywhere online. And then you can also check out Jacob's Apartment, which is like if you took Eternal Sunshine for the Spotless Mind and put it in a blender with Ghost World, and you like that flavor. It's a doomed romance story about two young adults in trying circumstances, kind of finding identity and finding purpose, where dreams and reality interweave. So pick up Jacob's Apartment. From what I understand, I think there's only one copy left on Amazon. It might have already been picked up, but check it out and see. If not, get it from your local bookstore. You can also follow me on YouTube, Joshua Kemble. I was about to say Jacob's Apartment, but might lead you somewhere else. So,
all right, now on to our guests. So from the Making Comics podcast, the first two guests we're going to introduce are from the Making Comics podcast. We'll start with Scott Loss. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Hey, what's up? So the most important thing I got going on right now is I have a Kickstarter for Second Shift Doorways. That's 2ND Shift. You could type that into Kickstarter and you'll find it straight away. It's going until the end of the month, so it ends April 1st at noon. So if anything you hear today sounds cool, or if you just want to pop over there right now while we're streaming and check it out, it's tons of guest appearances. Essentially, my characters are jumping through doorways to other dimensions and meeting heroes from those dimensions. So a lot of big hitters from the past, like E-Man, Megaton Man, Trekker, and a couple of modern guys like Mother Trucker from Andy Belanger and Brett Booth's The Lost Serpent Prince, and tons of other guys. Johnny Raygun, which is a really fun indie character by Rich Woodall, one of my favorite indie books. So yeah, check that out. Second Shift Doorways. You can just type in 2ND SHIFT onto Kickstarter and it should pop up straight away. Or if you go to I'm sure, where's the camera here? There. If you go to Scott Lost on Twitter, Instagram, Threads, I have the link there. So you can just click that and it'll take you straight to the Kickstarter.
Yeah, and I did put links in the description, but I think yours was the Accidental Aliens link. So I don't know if there's a link up there from it, but that's the link in the description. And then Keith has a link in the description also if you want to follow these guys. All right, Keith, what about you? What's going on in your world?
Before we get to me,
yes,
I just want to say, Scott, one way to paraphrase what you're doing with Old Ephemera is you put your thing down, you flip it, and you reverse it.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Just bringing that up. All right. So, yeah, I'm Keith Foster. I write 3 and counting comics. I have some stuff coming out later this year that's going to add a novel to that. But for now, I write Animals, which is animals ... catch a virus and now want to murder you. Kadoja, which is Godzilla meets H.P. Lovecraft, and 3 Protectors, which is Kung Fu in space. So that stuff is all at keithrfoster.com. And then, of course, this fine gentleman and I do the Making Comics podcast, which you already shouted us for.
Awesome. And a returning guest, probably one of the guests that's been on the show the most, who's not an actual host, Gary Hodges. Gary, how are things going?
It's going okay. I contracted a cold.
Nice.
Does that
Can't
count?
stop, won't stop, Gary. Yeah.
Thank you. But otherwise, I'm doing pretty good. I am the conceiver, writer, and drawer of D vs. M, aka Dinosaurs vs. Marsbots, an indie comic. All 3 are available and in stock on my Etsy shop. The easiest way to find all my links is probably to go to Instagram, Dinosaurs vs. Marsbots.
All right.
And if that didn't convince you, I'll just second that Gary's comic is incredible.
All right. So diving into Arizona Comic Arts Fest, a comic book arts festival, AZCAF. I'm going to start with Gary because Gary's the only person that went. This is the second year for him. He went to the first year and he went to the second. So I'm going to let you kick it off because you have a little more of a comparison than the 3 of us might. So
okay.
So Gary, I don't know where you want to start. I just feel free to start wherever you want, I guess.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. So this was year 2. So I'm the seasoned veteran, having gone to 2 of these as opposed to just 1.
The only 2.
The only 2. Yeah. It started. The first one was last year. The full name of it is the Arizona Comicbook Arts Festival. We've just been shorthanding it as AZCAF. They shorthand it as AZCAF in their social media. The idea is pretty much as you introduced. It's a Comic Con focused on comics and comic creators, which as soon as I heard about it last year, I felt like I had to get in on that because if you've watched my channel or if you watched me talking about cons here or listened to me talking about cons on Making Comics, I'm a little disenchanted with the modern giant con. I feel like it's more about movies and anime and manga and all sorts of things other than comic books. And
well, technically manga's comics, I would say.
That's true. Let's say anime.
One would argue the word means it.
Though manga is very also point taken, but I feel my impression is that manga fans let's talk about white comics. I think I would suggest that there are people who are manga fans, and that's the only kind of comic they're into.
Right.
You know, they're not actually looking at indies or the big two or anything else. Like they're into mangas exclusively. But I think there's some crossover there. You're right. Let's say Hollywood and anime and stuff like that, and cosplay. It's about cosplay. It's about getting your picture taken with Deadpool. So I feel like this is exactly the kind of show I want to go to. Now, I went to the first year last year, and it was phenomenal for me. It's a one-day show, and that single day was the best single day I've had at any con. It's not the most I've ever made at a con, because most other cons are a few days, but for one day, it was the best day I've ever had. And so I came and evangelized it to all of you guys, saying, like, you got to get in on this con. It's crazy. It's amazing. It's the best ever. I had such a good experience. It reinvigorated my interest in tabling. And it actually was a nice little morale boost at a point where I was late in the drawing of my third book, D vs. M 1979, and I was worn out. You know, it's that feeling toward the end of a long project where you're just a little burned out, you're a little tired. You're questioning why you put yourself through this, and I did this con and I had a good show, and it gave me a little bit of a second wind to finish my latest book. So as soon as they opened up applications for the second one, I signed up, or I applied immediately, and I encouraged all you guys to, if you're willing to make the journey, and then Scott, the drive, to do the same. Does that bring us to present? Is that a pretty good?
I think so. Yeah.
Yes. I don't know where you want to go first with this, guys, but I will, after that intro and talking about my experience in the first one. Year 2, and this was according to everybody there that I talked to who had been there last year, was not as good as the first year.
Right.
I myself did about half. I did okay, but it was about half what I did last year.
Right.
The prevailing, I don't know if it's the prevailing theory. The best theory I heard that I thought was probably a good one was that we were competing with a lot of other events. There was spring training in town, so there were baseball games all over the valley. And apparently there were 2 other enthusiast cons taking place. I think there was some sort of an anime con, and then there was ZapCon, which is like a pinball arcade kind of thing. Some of that is not, the Venn diagram doesn't perfectly overlap, but I feel like this is all sort of enthusiast culture, and how many cons are you going to go to in a weekend? Mm-hmm. I can accept, like, that probably did hurt it, because I felt like the talent this year was superior to year 1. Mm-hmm. There were more tables than year 1. And I thought there might have even been more traffic. It just, they weren't buying like they were last year. So there
Scott
was
had his hand up.
Yeah, Keith had a fan that actually mentioned that he was going to multiple cons that weekend. So, I mean, he was one of he's an outlier. Not many people go to multiple conventions in one weekend. It's usually, I'm doing this, I'm going to pick this, and that's what I'm doing this weekend. So, I think it did affect it, regardless of what kind of convention, like an anime manga convention, that'll affect your comic convention in a way. So I think that's all fair. And, I don't know, maybe there's comic book people that are also into pinball. And I think that's, like you said, it's enthusiast driven convention. More than likely there's some kind of crossover as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, we didn't have the same, we didn't have that comparison to my only thing is, like I said, I know everyone, yourself, Gary, and everyone that you kind of talked to that did the first show said that they were kind of down. Obviously we don't have that to compare it to, but I'm hoping that I don't imagine it's going to keep trending down. I think, I think they're going to, as a new con, hopefully they're going to take, because they sent out a survey and everything, and I answered it honestly and pretty much explained what you just did. But so hopefully, they'll make some changes, and whether it's more promotion, maybe it's finding a different day or whatever, we'll kind of trend back up because I really want this con to succeed. And the only way for a con like this, the only way, because it isn't big celebrities and things, the only way really for it to succeed is for the comic artists to do well and
yeah.
And
I'm still, I mean, I'm curious how you all felt, like the three other people who went. I'm still a believer. I will still absolutely sign up for year 3.
Oh,
I suspect this was a little bit of a fluke, because I still believe in the principle of it. And it was something I said when we were there, and I still completely believe this. When I'm sitting at Phoenix Fan Fusion, I feel like maybe 30% of the people walking by are my potential audience. Because a lot of people are there for an autograph from Jeff Goldblum. A lot of people are there to show off their cosplay. A lot of people are there to see a panel like on Doctor Who. Like, these are people who I'm not necessarily going to sell a comic to, and no matter what happens, they just aren't interested in indie comic they've never heard of. Whereas with AZCAF, I really genuinely believe that everyone who walked by my table, even if I didn't make a sale, 100% of them are my potential audience.
Yeah.
And that to me is, even if it's not nearly the numbers of Phoenix Fan Fusion, I would much rather have that experience where I don't know. I personally, I don't know about you guys, I find it really demoralizing to be sitting in a place where I feel like these people are filing by and they're not even the people I'm trying to meet. I would rather feel like I had a shot with every single person who walks by, and that's how I feel at AZCAF.
Yeah. Case in point, and this is anecdotal, but I've never been to a con where more people recognize me, like from YouTube.
Right.
And I think the reason why, and again, compared to Phoenix Comic Con, the numbers are like, I don't know how. I mean, the numbers are. I mean, I don't know how many times you multiply it about the number of people that are at a Phoenix Comic Con, but maybe 1 or 2 people might recognize me from my YouTube videos, which again, most of my YouTube, I've got thousands of videos on making comics. Most of the people here were interested in comics, interested in making comics. And I had just several people come by and say they recognized me from, my videos or whatever. So, that just goes to show you that's the right audience, even if it is smaller.
Right. And I bet the attendance of AZCAF is like 1/100th of Phoenix Fan Fusion. So
I think that's generous.
I
think that's generous.
Yeah, right. It might be generous.
75.
Yeah.
I think there were 75 to 100 people there. That's what it felt like to me.
Yeah.
And like Gary and Scott have both said, it's everyone there felt like they were into the comics, and much like you, Gary, I thought every person I talked to was a potential sale, and like it was a fun feeling. It was just like, oh, like everyone that said, hey, we just got here, we'll come back around, we want to look around first. At a normal convention, I would go, never seeing you again, not a big deal. You get a feeling. You're like, that one is a genuine, they might be back around, but then a lot of the times it's not. And this one, every single person was like, yeah, I'll see you in a little bit. Because the convention wasn't very big. I feel confident about my product, and I feel confident about my pitches. So I'm like, yeah, I'll see you in a minute. Like we'll see you back around. And so, my experience at the show was, I was expecting big numbers. You pitched it really good, and
you did. Best day ever.
Unfortunately,
right?
Not your fault.
I know what my best day ever is.
Yeah, it's like, if you gave us your numbers. And I was like, that's a really good number for Gary because he has 2 books. Literally, you have 2 books. I'm like,
I had 2 books last year. This year I had 3, but last year I only had 2 books.
50% increase in books.
Yeah, so I'm like, that's a great number for how many books you had. I'm like, okay, I'm expecting this number. I was like, I have a shitload of books. I in my head, I doubled the number. I'm like, I might do close to that, if that's the case. And so that was what I was expecting in my head. Now, by the end of the day, I did okay, but I feel like that was the general consensus of all the creators there. I think I talked to like 5 creators, not including you guys on the panel, and everyone was saying, I made about this. And I was like, oh, that's pretty much what I made, and there would be a difference of maybe $50, but it was kind of like everyone was topping off around the same number, and everyone was at the low part was making about the same number. So I left feeling okay about it. And Keith kind of talked me into re-signing for the next year. I was like, no, you know what? You're right. I think this is a fluke. And it was just because other conventions were running. And once he told me that bit of information, I felt very comfortable going, okay, yeah, we'll come back next year. This is just, just unfortunate circumstances that so many different conventions were running on the same weekend.
Yeah, I will take a little bit of a contrarian stance on this.
Oh,
why are we doing this?
That's a word we haven't used yet, right? Which is as Gary, as you were talking about, the idea of feeling better about the potential sale. I was thinking back to like some sort of fundamental psychology stuff, right? Which is the best type of feedback is positive feedback. The second best type of feedback is negative feedback. The third and worst type of feedback is no feedback.
Right.
No feedback.
Right.
And so for me, I would say that the foot traffic was so light. Like Scott was like 75 people came in the door, and I'm like, that feels like a really accurate number. It's probably more than that, but that's what it felt like.
75 to 100 tops.
Yeah.
Well, and that first hour or hour and a half was a ghost town. That was
I could have showed up 2 hours late and not missed a sale or a potential sale, and I could have left 2 hours early and not missed a sale or potential sale.
Yeah,
right?
For me, I was trying to get my square to work that whole time, so I didn't even know. I was like, is this thing? Can I get this thing to work? And then the funny thing is, most people paid cash. That's the convention. I haven't gone to too many conventions where almost everyone paid cash.
Yeah. So to compare this to Fan Fusion, I gotta say that for me, having a ton of foot traffic is like, it might be low probability potential sales, but at least I get a better feedback feeling by trying to recruit people out of the audience. And Scott and I talk about this all the time. We are not carnival barkers. Gary, you know this, but we also push it just a little bit. Like if someone stops at our table and gives it like 1 second of pause, we're probably going to give it a shot. And sometimes it's not even that, depending on how fuck it, YOLO we're kind of feeling. They'd be like, screw it, man. I'm just gonna pick people and at least give them a hello or something like that. So
yeah, it's
I
like
think
me at a I don't know, at a club when I was single. Just you give me a glance, I'm gonna talk to you.
Exactly. Hey,
what's up?
Right. So
yeah,
I mean,
comics.
So I think the foot traffic was so light that I was in the no feedback mode for a lot of it. And again, year one was great. Year two was much lower. You got to expect that year three is going to be somewhere in the middle, but hopefully closer to year one. And then we go from there. But yeah, I mean, I got to say for now, while I'm happy to do them both, I do like the feeling I get more from being in Fan Fusion, even if I'm taking, an unsuccessful hour trying to get people to stop by the booth and take a look at anything that's going on, as opposed to just no one being there, no feedback, no real mechanism. They go right by the table, etc. Once people stopped at my table, as for my experience, the yield of sales was pretty high, but it was getting them to even stop and pay attention to the table.
Yeah. And I think just based on the fact that the first one was so successful, I mean, typically a first year con, I mean, you got to have room to grow. So I think it was kind of an off year, because if they can bring enough people to create that for the first year, there's no reason why they can't, moving forward. So whatever the reason was that it didn't match the first, I still think they can assess that and hopefully bring that back and improve on it for years to come. And I'm glad to hear that you guys are coming back. I just didn't know, because, for me, it was pretty good for me, but I didn't have to travel either. For you guys having to travel, that's a whole other expense,
Right. It's just gas. Yeah. It's not airplanes. Right. So that's always going to make things better. So, I mean, And Scott and I have done it before, right? You split the car ride, you split the gas. It's not even a full tank each way. Like it's not that big a deal, right?
Yeah,
But
we
you
have
also consider
Yeah, right
your
now
time, the
stepping
time
foot
it
on a
takes to get
Boeing
down
is a
there.
risk I may not want.
Yeah. You don't want to do Boeing. Well,
You don't want,
the
you want the door to fall off or the wing, or just to have a baby sucked out of the plane.
well, and the
Snakes,
outlay
snakes.
for this one is I mean, and we'll see what it is next year, but is so low. I think what it was like $65 for a table or something.
Something
And
like that. Yeah.
67.
it's an 8-foot table. Like
Yeah,
that's
substantial,
another
yeah.
thing that I want to talk about a little bit
Yeah.
later. Like to have that kind of real estate is really nice when you like it gives you display options that you
Mhm.
just even if you had a whole table at most other cons it's a 6-foot. So like
Yeah.
an 8-foot table, with that's like 2.5 or 3 feet deep.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of there's so many weird things you can do with that. And yeah, for $65. Like
And we have some questions. I just want to pull this one out.
Yeah.
I'll answer it, and you guys can tack onto it if you want. But Christopher Runsman wants to know, with numbers like that, are you confident that I'll have the event next year? And I am, because I mean we had Ryan Cody on the show who runs the con, and he's doing this for the love of comics, not necessarily for the love of money. So it's not whatever they brought in. If it was low, I'm confident that he'll continue to do it. So
yeah.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Scott.
And even though we're
Um,
saying that it felt like 75 or 100 people, certainly more, I mean, I bet there were at least a couple hundred people that showed up, and that's like with door prices and then the table fees and everything, like I'm sure he didn't
I think I'm a
lose.
pretty good judge of numbers. I was doing pro wrestling for 10 years, and
Yeah.
so we'd have these smaller shows, and we got real good at counting heads
He's like,
in the audience.
Called bullshit, Gary Hodges.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Um,
So what's your expert appraisal? What was your impression from?
Well, I think it was about 75 to 100 people tops. I don't think there was
Ooh.
any more than that. And to answer Christopher's question, I think the major factors that go into it are, number one, did the promoter make his nut back? Now, that's between ticket sales. So maybe there was only 75 to 100 people that showed up, but how many people bought tickets? Because sometimes people buy tickets and they're like, oh, what was the ticket price? Like $10, $20
Yeah.
or something like that at
Yeah,
the most.
Something like that.
That's a good point.
So it was really low ticket sales. So there was the potential like something came up for people, or they got lazy and they just didn't feel like going, and so they just didn't show up. But they
Tigers
already
were playing
paid
a
that money.
spring training
And then
game.
on top of that, you have your vendors. So your vendors are paying your promoter as well. So between those two factors and the fact that Scott said Ryan was on the pod and he's doing it for the love of the game, then more than likely, if he breaks even, he's going to do it again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and he might also be inclined to see it as a fluke compared to year one.
Yeah.
Where even though it was discouraging for him. And so remember that guy that we had dinner with, Damon from Arc Welder Studios, he had done a drink and draw with Ryan the evening before. And he said, I hope this wasn't, talking out of school, but he said that Ryan was concerned about the other cons in town.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it'll be a natural place for his mind to go to, just like ours did, where it was like, yeah, it wasn't what it was last year, but probably because of that. Like maybe if we can schedule it differently next year, it'll be.
Yeah.
Well, and timing for cons is like a huge thing.
Yeah.
Because
And it's tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, Josh? I mean, it's tough to. I'm not cutting you off, am I, Josh?
Not at all. You're
Okay,
good.
yeah, it's like, for all we know, AZCAF planted a flag, and then other people are like, okay, that seems like a cool weekend, right? It's like how when you go to a rest stop, there's 4 fast food restaurants instead of one, because one set it up and then did well, and everybody else is like, that seems like a good place to put a fast food restaurant. I'll put mine there, right?
Yeah.
So for all we know, AZCAF, chose first, and then other people kind of planted their flag as well. And it's like, what's up, man? You're on my corner, So to your point, Josh, it's there's some degree of strategy, but probably a lot of randomness, and you have to fight like a copycat thing. But it does feel like they're in it for the love of the game. I mean, that survey, the questions on it seemed genuinely heartfelt and interested, because I think the organizers want to put on a good con, and I think so. Yeah, I'm very confident. I'm confident 99% that it'll be here next year. I think year 6 You know, I think at some point you
Right.
probably got to give anything 4 or 5 years on
Yeah.
if you're trying something of this scope. So it's year 3 and 4, I feel pretty good about. I'm not sure about what year 6 is because then you have data for a while, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
excited about it because it reminds me, from what you guys are describing, it really sounds a lot like Ape was back in the day, and that was always my favorite con. And then there was Stumptown too in Oregon, which was a great indie, very book friendly con that, weirdly enough, like appropriate to this conversation, switched schedules, and I think that killed the con. Actually, they switched the time of year it happened, and it just destroyed the attendance.
Yeah, I mean they do bring in guests from the big two, so it's not totally indie focused, but it's definitely comic focused. And
but
of
it's
course,
very
Bob,
comics.
yeah.
Yeah,
But did anyone talk to any of the invited guests to see how they did? I mean, they don't have their table, but again, the table price was so low it's not even really doesn't factor in. But I'm curious the people that were invited guests who maybe have a couple big two comics under their belt or something like that. Did anyone to talk to any of them? Because that's the one thing I didn't get to do. I didn't get to go around, which and that might have just been because it wasn't gangbusters. Otherwise, I got tons of money in my pocket to spend. I'm going to.
I spent the bulk of my time theorizing on the low attendance with Gary Hodges.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's when it's slower. It's funny. There were a few people I had talked to on the way in saying like, "Oh, I'll come by and visit," and I never really left my table because when sales are just okay, you kind of want you don't want to abandon your table. I remember year 1 of this one, and then some Phoenix Fan Fusions in the past. If things are going well, you're kind of like, I'm way ahead. I might as well go wander around. So I was stuck at my table the whole time. There were a few people I wanted to go see how it was for them, but
yeah,
that's funny. I'm the complete opposite. If I'm not doing well, I'm like, screw this. I'm gonna go walk around. The only pro that I talked to was Alex Sinclair, but I talked to him before the show, so I didn't get to talk to him after, unfortunately. I think he was already gone, or he was packing up, and I didn't want to bug him like at the end, but I really should have. But I mean, I think the general consensus from the local artists or smaller artists was about the same. So, but those guys are bigger names, so the people that showed up probably did do a bit better. I think I actually spoke to someone, and his booth was closer to the front, and he said his first hour was really good. So I think the reason,
it takes a while for those people to get in.
I think what had happened was people were coming in the door and tackling the first couple rows first, spending their dough, and then eventually they trickled back down to us. And who knows how that went for everyone.
Well, I'm a little fuzzy on where were we in the at the farthest back, like the farthest back corner?
Yeah, I don't know where the entrance is. We came in. The load-in was on the opposite end of us, but that might not have been the entrance.
That's not where the customers came in. Yeah. I think it was on the opposite side, and that's why
it was like down our aisle. This is Scott Circlin's booth right here. Then it was back down that aisle, that way.
Right. Yes. So it's possible, some of it was that we were just as deep into the floor as you could be.
Yeah, I mean, we were near the bar, though. Like
we were near the bar. Yeah,
I mean, Scott Loss knows this, that Invader did a LA Comic Con, and we were out near the beer garden. What a great place to be at LA Comic Con. So, we had a fantastic LA Comic Con, and I think a lot of it is, you walk in, you're like, oh my God, we're in the back, we're near this big, door or whatever. That's
a great place to be. You get so much cross traffic.
You're near the food trucks in the beer garden, man. Yeah, it was amazing, right? So I think, I don't know, it's I think there are probably some people that had some benefits from location, but I don't know. I deign to say that in certain types of things, like I personally think location is overrated. But that also relates to the kind of books that I sell. I sell genre books, right? So if you're into giant monsters or kung fu or horror, you're gonna walk by my booth and know, right? So I think if you're a little deeper into genre, you might be a little more location proof. where, you know, if you have like art prints to sell that are competing with other art prints, I could see how location would matter more. I could see how certain types of vendors would feel more like location is essential. So
There was
just a slight pushback on that, not a total one. Like that, what you just said totally makes sense. But if you have an end cap, that's just premium location. So like maybe your genre finding fans, they find you easier because you're on an end cap. So and I think that kind of proves a little bit with me and Scott circling, was me and Scott were both on the end cap facing each other. And so I think out of the four of us, I think you and I did the best. Not by much, I don't think, to the other two, but like I think our location helped a lot. And so as far as the beer garden goes, you would think that would have helped a little bit better. But I think from where people were entering, they're wrapping around to maybe the pros first and then trickling back around. But I guess so when I had said people in the front were doing better, it was people on the closer side to the pros. So those people said that, or at least one of the guys over there said the first hour was really busy. And I'm like, oh, that's where all the fans were.
You know, that can be a blessing and a curse, though, because sometimes if you're across from the pros, then all the traffic will just pour to them. And like if you try to pull people, they're just like, whatever, dude, I'm in line for so-and-so. And the lines sometimes can even block your booth.
Yeah,
so
that's what I was going to say.
It can be a blessing and a curse, you know, like,
I had that one San Diego Comic Con. I was next to this guy and he had a bit of a gimmick. Like he charged $20. He had a ream of computer paper and he would draw and color a piece for you in 5 minutes. That was his gimmick. That guy had a line out the freaking door. Like it was, and I was right next to him. So basically his people were blocking my booth. And on the last day, I finally was able to switch spots. And I actually moved to like a pros row. I was able to get right next to Norm Rapmond, who is a pretty well-known inker. I think he started off with Liefeld and Extreme Studios, and he's been working for DC for years, decades. And so I got moved right next to him. His crowd wasn't too daunting. He constantly had people going to his table, but it was enough for people to go like, oh, what's this over here? And so I would actually get, I would get some spill off from him. So it actually worked to my advantage. But to your point, the first 3 days were screwed because that guy had this crazy line and his line was blocking my table. And all people wanted was essentially kind of the gimmick of what he was doing. So,
well, I've seen that happen with toys a lot too, with books. When you're trying to move books and there's like a toy rush, that can really conflict because most toy collectors aren't like looking to like read an indie comic, you know, not all, but I'm just saying, you know, it's
very rare.
No, I've also had a mixed experience because at one convention I was across from Garth Ennis and it worked really well because there's a little bit of a, you know, horror, gnarly kind of thing going there. And then at another convention, I was across from someone where their gimmick was actually that they murdered you. And that wasn't that good, right? Like everyone was dead.
That's quite a gimmick.
Yeah. Well, this Diet Coke is really strong in fairness. Yeah.
Well, there's a phenomenon. We got to come up with a name for it. But Keith, you and I were talking about it on the day where I've observed when you're just watching people walk by, I try to draw a little diagram. So if these are tables on either side, this is how people's eyes bounce from left to right as they're moving up. You know, like as they're walking down the aisle, they'll look and you'll see here, like where their eyes are. They're kind of skipping every other table on either side. They're like moving forward and they're kind of 45-degree angling with their eyes like across. So if you have, in my experience, if there's an eye-catching table, either directly across from you or to either side of you, you're going to get missed because they're kind of going like this down the aisle and you're kind of no one wants to look at every single table in succession. That's just my impression.
It's too much.
For years. And I don't know if there's a name for it or how to explain it, but I'm a believer that this is a thing. Like we were watching it happen because there was a guy across from me at this one who had this giant canvas up that he was working. I think it was fan art, like you guys had recognized it, but nevertheless, it was really eye-catching. And I could see if someone was into it, it was a big Batman canvas. The people whose who were like interested in that, I just knew like they're not even going to see my table because that's not how they work. Like they're going to see that and they're going to continue on. And he got the attention on the left and right side of the like they're on the aisle, they're looking at this side at this canvas. I'm on the opposite side, so they'll never see me.
Yeah.
Yep.
Do you want to segue to the booth designs? Because I know you sent me some pics, and I thought Corey was going to chime in on something. I don't know if that's still what you had is still relevant, Corey. Okay.
There's a couple of questions too. I don't
Do you
know
want
if
to
you guys
address
saw
some
those
questions?
in the chat.
Yeah,
There's one from Jim Lujan. What one thing would you add or change to make this particular con better for you?
Where? How far back is that one?
Where is that?
There's been a lot of talk.
It was
about
a
20
few
minutes
under
ago.
Christopher's question. It's 2 under Christopher's question that we answered.
Question. Oh, okay. Here it is. Okay. Sorry. I missed that. Sorry, Jim.
So I would say number one, well, which I answered in the questionnaire, and I'd imagine all you guys did as well, was please double and triple check that there are no other shows running the weekend that you plan on running. That was, I had a lot of positive feedback for the show. I said, hey, I love this. I love the check-in. It was real nice and smooth. The con itself had good vibes. Every fan I talked to was really happy to be there, and they wanted to talk comic books and all of those things. The only negative was there wasn't enough of them. So, so for me, it's make sure, you're checking the date.
Yeah, one thing that I would say that I didn't think of at the time, but because I just noticed that today, because I went on their website to try to find pictures to use for the thumbnail, and there weren't really any pictures of the con. And I think even if you if the traffic was that sparse, but you got a lot of cool booths and stuff, take some pictures and show people what it's like, because otherwise they don't really know what they're getting into. If you can go and you can show different booths, especially like if you've got some bigger creators that got, whatever, anything cool, take some pictures of that. And then maybe I'll reach out to Ryan and just mention that. But
that's a really good.
I noticed there are no pictures other than pictures of photos that of people that are going to attend as guests or whatever. Other than that, there's really no pictures of the event.
That's a huge, in regards to events in general. Like in music, there's this iconic movement that happened in Washington, D.C. that started with like Minor Threat and like a lot of bands that eventually like made the whole Discord thing and stuff like that, and kind of revolutionized punk rock. But initially at its inception, half of the most iconic photos that kind of spread and grew a scene were taken at shows that had like 15 kids.
Yeah.
And they took them in a way where it looked packed and crazy. Mm-hmm. And then it kind of created a mimicking effect where like more people showed up and they were expecting this
because the crowd
chaos that they were seeing in these photos. So if you want to grow a scene, you gotta visually give people. It's kind of like having a queue in front of your in front of your booth. Like if people see a line, they want to be where the line is. If people see people at an event, they were going to want to go.
That's really good. I encourage you to send that along to Ryan.
I'll send that over to Ryan. So based on talking about photos, do we want to pull up some of the photos that we took of our booths and stuff and kind of anything we want to talk about? Okay, so let me go here. All right, so Gary was first to send photos, so I'm going to pull Gary's up, and you can kind of tell me what you had in mind in your setup.
It's a little thing. It might be interesting for people doing booths. So here's what my booth more or less looked like. You see, I got the new banner back there. I finally got a new banner where I had been trucking out the D vs. M 1975 banner for years and years and years, even though I was now like many comics later and doing a whole series rather than a single book. So, but what I wanted to talk about, first of all, like it's hard to visualize how big this table is, but like I said, it's 8 feet long and let's see, how deep is it? It would be 30 inches deep, so almost 3 feet deep. And the thing that I was having good luck with, I was talking to you guys about it before, and it's something I can only get away with a large table. You see here on the bottom right, there's a foam core board with an image on it. Yeah, so this is what the image is. And looking at this, so the comic covers here are as big as an actual comic. And what I do is I throw a demo copy in each one of these little, it's kind of like the Monopoly board where chance and community chest cards are. Like I put a demo copy of each book in each of those little placeholders. What I like about this, I just feel like it's very effective. People come by, first of all, it pulls their eyes down. Like they look at the banner and that's fine, but then I want to make them linger a little bit looking at something on my table, and this has them read a little bit. They see images from in the book, so I'm not waiting for them to pick up a book and open it to see the art. They immediately see art. They see a quick breakdown of what each of the 3 books are, and each book is right next to that. And I just felt like, ever since I've been doing this, I did this at the last AZCAF too, it could be any number of other things. It's hard to know what is the thing that's helping. I feel like I'm getting a lot of conversion out of this. It makes people stop. It makes people look down. It makes people pick up a book. It makes them know what they're going to be picking up and seeing. It's not just like, taking a chance at just picking up a book. It clearly invites, like, this is what this is for. Pick up books. I'm not going to, if you touch something, I'm not going to just like, oh, it's only for buying. Like, it's obviously a little reading room area. And the one thing that was weird about the show, even though it was a little slow, or a lot slow, depending on where you were, when I made a sale, and Keith, I was remarking on this to Keith the whole time, maybe much to his chagrin.
Rubbing it in my face. Yeah.
I would sell all 3 books every time, and at Phoenix Fan Fusion, I'm pretty happy if I can get them to buy one of them. Like and they'll be like, well, and they're looking at them, and then they'll pick one based on which character is interesting. Like I want the Man in Black one, or I want the scientist one, or whatever. And I'll sell one, and that's cool. This was the first time where just about all but 2 of my sales for the day were all 3 books.
Mm.
And I didn't feel like I was doing anything really different. I mean, Keith, you were sitting next to me. I don't know if you thought my pitch was any different. I felt like I was just being me, but I had this display that kind of maybe involved them a little bit more and gave them a better sense of what, I don't know, it got them more enthusiastic, I thought.
I think it's a real strong setup. That cork board with those images and the description of what's going on, it's picture perfect. It's awesome. Especially for the amount of books you have, it's still very doable. And even when you move to 4, you'll be able to just kind of expand the cork board a little bit to make that work, or just maybe make the font and the photos smaller, and you'll be good to go. But yeah, it's brilliant. Like when you told me what it was, I was like, oh, that's really good. That was a really good idea. So,
all right, Scott, since you
one
kind
of
of
the
brought
perks
it
of
up,
a big table. So,
did you want to talk about your setup here, Scott?
sure. So this guy in the pink, so I hired him for the day just to kind of stick that gut out.
Just to look sexy.
And I felt like it caught a lot of eyes.
yeah.
And, I was just
And
like,
that
Who's your
exact
booth
pose
babe?
the whole time. Like
Yeah.
7 hours of just that pose.
just make sure you're scratching your ass the whole time, and we'll get some sales. And there he is. He's a champ. He's a pro, So my setup is not as pleasing as Gary's is, and it's something I'm actually going to be working on. Honestly, I should have had this setup changed by this show, but I didn't, because that's who I am. And like for me, making comics it just kind of absorbs me, and that's all I do. And so I didn't do what I was supposed to, and kind of like have this really cool backdrop. And, since this was a smaller convention, I actually didn't mind what I was doing for this. So the backdrop is just a sheet of prints that I have for sale. And that can be really eye-catching. But I want to do it in a different way where it's a little bit more sleek in design. And so that will be changed in the future. But if you can see, so right in the middle as we're looking at it, it's to the right. There's like these metal sheets, these metal prints in the middle there. And then where I'm sitting, that's all basically kind of like art and drawing that gets done. So all the prints are right there in front of me in that book, and like metal trading cards. And then everything to the right is all my books. So I kind of had the booth divided as to like, well, what are you into? So if I saw people looking at the print folder or the prints behind me, I would direct them to the folder. It's like, oh, hey, if you like the prints and you want to see them closer or see different ones that are in this book here, And then, so if they're staring to the right, then I know they're looking at comics. So then I can start the conversation there. So when you're doing conventions, it's really important to know what the fan base is looking at and what to talk to them about. So the prints, usually when those catch eyes, those fans are not interested in comic books for the most part. Like that's, I would say 90% of the people that look at prints, or maybe 85% of the people that look at prints, they're not looking for comics at all. And then so you'll have those rare occasions where you can kind of convert them, which my book kind of does sometimes actually, because the front of the book has original art pages from one of my comics. So then I start talking to them about that, and they're like, oh, that's cool. And then they move to the prints, then I know they don't care. But if they're actually interested in it, they actually will move over to the comic side and start flipping through the comics. So just something to keep in mind when you guys are, if you guys plan on doing conventions or, you know, are a creator or something like that, your layout is very important to kind of maneuver people where you want them to be. So my booths are a little dual focused because I need to make the most money that I can at the show. So like, in an ideal world, I would get rid of the prints altogether and just focus on comics. But I have to make money at these shows. So whether that be comics or art, you know, we're going to go ahead and do whatever we can to get those sales.
All right. And I want to pull up, there's a photo here of a sketch that you did.
Yeah,
so
this guy's psyched. He's psyched out of his mind.
It doesn't look psyched, but it's
he was happy. But when I said, "Hey, can I take a photo of you?" his face turned to that. So I don't know that he was happy to take the photo, but he was happy with the sketch cover. Yeah, I promise you. Yeah. So,
and here's your dinner.
And that's our dinner.
And here's the dog that tried to eat me. Anyone know what that reference is from?
Oh my gosh!
It's from Fletch.
I still want that. I want another one of those right now.
Yeah. All right. So Keith, I'm going to pull up your. You can kind of tell me your thoughts behind your booth setup here.
Sure. So, I mean, you know, as it took me a while. Well, Gary was the one that had to point out that like I have a color theme. You know, like I just know the colors I like. So I mean, you can see I kind of like what is it? It's got secondary colors, a lot of reds, a lot of things in the red family. That's just kind of my jam. And you know, Scott was talking about art. And what I am cool with my booth setup is that I now write 3 different kinds of comics. And you can see like Kadoja from here, even you can see how it gets the most table space, but it's the thing I've been doing for more than a decade, where animals, which you can see on the far left, and then 3 protectors on the far right, those are, you know, newer properties, right? Like I've only had 1 issue of them, and they were both in, I think, well, one was 2022, one was 2023. So, you know, it's meant to be a representation. And I used to have a lot of prints as well, but the difference between Scott and I is I'm not an artist. I can't just draw something for people. I write stuff. And so before, when I had, you know, a booth that was just the one property, it was very giant monster themed. It was a lot of, you know, Godzilla prints and things like that. And they were all drawn by the art team of Kadoja, right? But now that it's sort of branching into this other thing, into like Keith Foster being a writer, instead of it being here's a Kadoja booth, and by the way, I happen to be Keith. It's like, no, this is a Keith book, and a booth, and by the way, one of these things that I write is a giant monster book. So I'm going to keep on messing with this as I go. I mean, later this year, I'm going to have a novel get released. Next year, I'll have, yet another comic, and I expect that it'll kind of turn into that cycling, writer thing where I have, 3, 4, 5, 6 different realms of stories as opposed to one thing. So, I mean, I like the black background. I like having the stacks of books there. Lost in the photo, you can see maybe below that white Kadoja cover, to the left, there is a metal print. And that metal print is actually a print of Godzilla. And the other thing that I want to call out is to the right, it's hard to see, but if you look at where the 3 Protectors banner is, you'll see that I have some metal trading cards there. And I also have cassette tapes. Yeah. Because I've been writing comics for, over a decade, but I've been doing music for 3 decades. And so a lot of those, the nice thing about metal prints, if they're eye-catching, metal trading cards, and also cassette tapes is whether or not you sell them, they can bring people to the booth. They can bring eyes to the booth. And I've had a fair amount of sales where people see like, oh, Godzilla, like, this is cool. Did you do this? It's like, no, I didn't do this. But the creative team on the book I write, this original giant monster book, you know, that's where they're from. And then that turns into a conversation on the monster book. So the nice thing about some of these things is they don't have to sell to be effective for your booth. So, you know, I mean, I'm proud of the covers. I'm proud of the whole black backdrop and things kind of popping out from the black. Oh, you can also see that there's some Kadoja sort of in action figures there. Those are 3D printed figures. So, I mean, it's just, you know, add to the portfolio, try to have a bunch of things that contribute a little bit, and then go from there.
Yeah, I really love the Invader Comics logo. It's just so clean. I love the V and the A. I mean, just, you know, and the tentacles coming up. I mean, it's very striking. It looks great on your books too, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, man.
And I like the fact that you've got you right on the posters down below. You explain really simply what the books are about, which is great.
Yeah. No, thank you. I mean, I think in a weird way, maybe I was telling Gary or Scott this when I set up, but the aisles were tight here. And those kind of banners, like this photo does a disservice to how close the booths were to each other and how narrow the aisles were. Mm-hmm. So, you know, at wide open cons, like a bigger con, like a Fan Fusion, having these banners kind of low hanging on the table can really work, you know, like I think it does well. But here the aisles were a lot tighter. So like, again, this photo makes it seem like it's a very wide aisle, but it wasn't a very wide aisle. It was maybe 6-7 feet max. So, you know, I don't know how much impact they had when you have aisles that tight.
One thing I always tell people when designing a booth is that some people, when they walk down an aisle, and depending on their personality, whether they're, you know, maybe they're more introverted or whatever, some people will have their head down, you know, kind of, and some people have their head up. I mean, so there's different levels, and like what you've got here, where you've got books facing up and books flat, something like that. That's what I always recommend, because that way, no matter if you're looking down or if you're kind of looking straight, you're always it's gonna catch your eye. So you never really know where people's eyes are gonna kind of trend towards.
Yeah, I think that's a testament to what Gary came up with too for the book, because I think that serves the more introverted reader like really well, because there are a lot of people who go to a booth, they don't want to hear your pitch, they don't want to talk, they just want to look at your table. Yeah. And for those people, having a written pitch right next to the book is like perfect catering to that market. And that's a huge market in comics, because, you know, a lot of people who read comics are socially awkward book people, you know? And so it's like, and honestly, a lot of people who sell comics are socially awkward.
A lot of people who make comics.
Yeah. So, but I that's why when Gary, like, you showed us that a while ago, but I thought that was just such a smart idea to do that, because that caters exactly to what Scott was talking about, where you've got front facing, you've got, you know, a lot of stuff to kind of draw people to you, but also like, so you can do your pitch, but also having stuff on the table to kind of have people peruse and spend a little time, slow them down. That's the key. It's like, you want them to have a moment of like, oh, I got to slow down and kind of peruse this a little bit. And I think both you and Keith have a really good done a good job at that. But Gary, yours is so good. If I booth again, I will probably steal it, because
I'd be curious to see if it's like, if I've got something here, because again, I can't tell if it's just coincidence or that's like actually kind of helping. But I also want to, I think we probably brought this up last time we did Phoenix Fan Fusion. I have to get in on this 3D printing game that Keith,
that's cool.
I first saw you, and now Scott had some stuff on his table this year where Keith has these little Kadoja figures, which you saw in the picture. And what's fascinating about it to me, and intriguing, and it's something, like I said, something I want to get in on. My impression, Keith, is you don't sell that many, but it stops people and everyone comments on it. Like, it really makes people go like, oh, that's cool, what's this? And then they might buy something else. Maybe they didn't buy the thing. So like, if you get single-minded of like, well, how many of these figures can I possibly sell? They're expensive.
More figures.
Doesn't matter. Like, you know, people are going to stop and look, and it's going to get their attention. And sometimes all you need to do is break them out of their zombie block, and you know, you can get a sale.
No, and I think
I've actually sold stuff of Keith's at Phoenix Fan Fusion. Actually, I think maybe even with you there, Gary. And
Yeah.
someone was walking by, and they saw Keith's Kadoja figure, and they like, and then they like came over, and you go, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's this giant monster from my buddy's Giant Monster comic." He goes, "How much are those comics?" And I said, "Oh, $15." And he goes, "I'll take all 3." And I'm like, what the fuck just happened? Like,
Right?
like I've never seen such an easy sale.
Yeah.
And so yeah, those things are like definitely an eye catcher. Like I just had some printed for like one of the most recent books that I just did, and I don't know that it helped for this show, but I think it'll help at other shows, just because of the experience that I have had with boothing next to Keith or with Keith.
Yeah.
And oh, go ahead. I got something
No,
else
please,
to go
after you're
back
done.
to. Okay, so to hop back real quick, when you guys were talking about levels of eye levels, essentially, like Josh said, a lot of people are introverted, don't want to necessarily talk, and so they'll have a tendency to look down. And so when you arrange your books, you want to have them flat on the table, you want to have them standing up, and it's also important, like the banner behind you is another thing, and that's why I do the prints behind me, is because a lot of times they don't want to look at you. They want to look up, they want to look down, they want to look somewhere in the middle, they don't want to necessarily see you. So it's good to have things in all of those areas. And I think that's, Keith and I, we've been doing this for like 13 years, so it's something we figured out. It's like you got to have those different levels just to collect as many eyes as you can.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to say, I think thing number one, Josh, you've synthesized Gary's idea in a way where I think, like something I think I'd like to do, and I still have time to do this for WonderCon, not next weekend, but the weekend after, is create little cards that sort of stand up above the comic that have a little description, because I've seen those things too, and they're great.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that, that's something that I'd like to incorporate quickly, but yeah, I mean, it's interesting because of I was going to say that that's not even my most eye-catching figure. Scott, the one you're talking about was a certain color that I'm looking to reprint soon. So yeah, again, to your point, it helps. Sometimes it's about just getting people to stop and break their sort of zombie walk. Whoever said that was a good way to put it.
Yeah.
I used to design booths in a different life when I was a director of marketing. We do these trade shows, and so a different world than Comic-Cons. But I would always run it through the 30-10-2 rule, and from 30 feet away, there should be something enticing that gives me an idea of what's going on. From 10 feet away, I should get additional information from that, and from 2 feet away, I get the details in the hook. And if you can do that 30-10-2, I mean, that works for graphic design, that works for illustration, but for booth design and event marketing and event design in general. If you're thinking of that also gives you like your heights and sight lines as well, like you guys were talking about that, because the stuff that's the 30, that should be higher than head height. And then the stuff that's 10 is typically between like eye line and low sternum, and then the stuff that's 2 goes sternum and lower. And
nice.
If you can think through that type of thing, you're actually subconsciously drawing them closer, just because they want that extra information. If you can get those 3 levels, if you can hit 5 levels of hierarchy, it's such a subtle draw that they won't even notice that all of a sudden they're just like holding something in their hand,
like 75 feet in the air and then the floor. I mean, what are the other 2 levels, Corey?
Well, that's the name of my next book, by the way. 5 Levels of Hierarchy. That's
5 levels of hierarchy. Yeah, it's
nice. I hope it's a kung fu flick, because that sounds very like
it's a romance
the Chambers
story.
of Shaolin.
It's adult. It's adults only.
I won an award at a booth that I designed one time for the North American Music Merchants, and what I did was I tried to hit as many of the different senses as I possibly could. This is kind of like sciencey. Paul's making fun of me in the chat, but I was selling ukuleles, and so everybody else has like concrete, pipe, and curtain, and a lot of plastic and metal, and I bought a big giant kind of somebody tore down a barn somewhere in the back east, and I bought all of the reclaimed barnwood, and I built a surf shack out of reclaimed barnwood. And then
Nice.
I took sand that had quartz in the sand so it would catch the light, and I covered the ground in the sand, and then in the front of that I bought that really plush grass, and then I had every couple hours I would take like a perfume, and I would spray the posts of the thing, and then I had my musicians there like playing, and so I hit all five senses. And anyway, it was irresistible. Like people could not avoid like walking up to it.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah.
I'm gonna have to get some kind of
take some of
spray
that and
for
apply it
the.
to comics.
I'm gonna have to get some spray for that convention smell.
Like
Just
musty
that.
comic. Musty
Yeah.
We should
comic.
make a candle for that.
There's tons
Convention
of that
smell
everywhere.
You got to do something like bacon. You know, just something that you want to
Cinnamon
smell
bread.
different than everybody else. Yeah.
Well-
Just do bacon on the left side of the booth, and then like cinnamon rolls on the right side of the booth, and just watch people flock. It'll be great.
All right,
There's
so I guess
something I can't decide if it would be too goofy, but maybe it doesn't even matter if it is goofy. I always thought so. You know, like for example, the table thing I have, it's foam core. Foam core is cheap. It's really easy. You can get paper that's adhesive that you can put any kind of design on it. You can cut it. It's fairly easy with an X-Acto to cut in any shape you want. And I always thought I even got as far as researching it. You can buy all sorts of little battery powered or fairly low power motors. And I thought, what if I did like a flying saucer and just had it go like this perpetually, like 10 feet up,
Yeah.
so people, they're walking around the con, they see this strange little flying saucer hovering,
I'll have that lead into my booth design, because that's something that I could, with my display, I could have definitely done something like that. And now that you brought it up, I might have to try to figure out how to do that.
You never see anybody do it, and it would be fairly inexpensive. And I
Yeah.
think people would absolutely walk over just to see what the hell is that flying saucer I'm seeing,
I did that with Gatorboard. Gatorboard is like foam core, but for adults, and so
Okay.
it's like an inch
Like
thick,
sexy.
and instead of paper, it's got aluminum on the outside, and then it's got EPS high density styrofoam on the inside, and then it comes in sheets of 12 by 6. But I would cut holes. So I had like a brick pattern that I printed, and then I graffitied all over that. But then I broke out of the bricks, and I would put like a TV screen behind the hole, so that I could do like an animation or a video that would play through the TV screen. But a really easy way to do what you're talking about, Gary, is if you have something on like a thin wire, and you hit it with air. And so if you have like a fan that's like 5 to 7 feet
that would
away,
make it flutter a little.
you get enough erratic movement that it doesn't seem mechanical, and it actually gets you a lot of organic
That's cool.
movement. Yeah, there's some
I just
really
think
fun
there's
stuff like that.
possibilities there, and like I said, it would be fair. Those little motors and things, that they're not expensive. Foam core is not expensive. I can do the mounting myself, and I don't see anybody else doing it.
Yeah.
Is someone chuckling at mounting? Oh, I can mount. Let me tell you.
Whoa.
Back to
Yeah,
the
I've got all
adult
these
thing.
pictures up, so I can't look at the chat at the same time.
Nobody wants that visual.
I'm
wanna throw
I'm
in-
knocking them out of the park tonight. I'm making weird racist declarations.
Yeah.
You're mounting them all yourself.
So
I don't want you
Gary,
mounting
I wouldn't-
anything. I could see your like ponytail flopping back and
Yeah.
forth. Like it's
Gary, I could see. I think you should chase that, because, like, I know one of my friends who just kills at like every convention. We've had him on multiple episodes too. Is Chris Kawagua, and he comes up with crazy ideas that he'll just do for the next convention. One of them was like he wanted to make a fortune telling machine, because he's got like a comic with a fortune teller and stuff like that people could put like coins in, and they'd actually get like a fortune telling card. And he made it, and I've seen it like work so effectively at cons, because now some people don't even use it, but they just come by to check it out because it's just this cool little thing. And then he's also made like rigged like puppets of like his characters, and one of his characters is a puppet. So I think that you know, and not overwhelming his art or his content or whatever, but it's just a curio to kind of fit this like vibe of like a place you want to pull closer to and check out. So I think chasing those little like if you have that like gut feeling, I think you should do it.
It's worth a try, and
yeah.
and that's the other thing.
And
you know,
that'll
with
catch your audience.
Yes, and with
Yeah.
AZCAF being a fairly low risk con, you know, financially, I sort of have been treating it as just like a weird R&D con, where it's like, let's just, I mean, if I'm going to try something, I might as well try it there, you know,
Yeah.
because what's really the risk?
Yeah.
Love it.
All right, so I'll pull up my booth design. Now, if anyone has seen any of my booths of the past, I mean, I used to have a huge mad science supply booth with just tons of different SKUs and things, and it was super elaborate. So for this con, because it's comic focused, I just wanted to scale down to just two things, because when I used to exhibit with all these different things, sometimes I would wonder, you know, what are people drawn to? I mean, is it just too much? Is it just too confusing? To try to explain what I was doing, that, oh, this is like a mad science supply store or whatever. It did get a little confusing to have to explain all it. So I basically boiled it down to two things, and both comics related. One was my comic book Young and the Dead, and the other was my how to make comic workbooks, kind of based on my Making Comics 101 series on YouTube. So I split it right down the middle, and so I'll bring this up. And I don't know if you can see, and I've actually had the actual boards here, but for these two, in the middle we've got kind of the X-ray glasses logo that I'm using now, but then I've got the Young and the Dead and the Make Your Own Comics above the books, and it might be hard to tell here, but what I did was I took a cue from like the old Tower Records promotion. We used to go into a record store, and they would take all these posters and they just kind of bend them and they kind of cut them out, level them up, almost like when you open a flip book, how stuff pops out like that. Not a flip book, but a pop-up book. And I kind of created that. So I'll show you here. Hold on.
He mounted those all himself, by the way.
Yes.
Scott can mount too. Scott's mounted once or twice.
Here's the board, and I don't know if I turn it, you can probably see how it's, you know, it's three-dimensional. Oh, there we go. Yeah, so it's three-dimensional, and I don't know, I just had a fun doing this, and I did this all on my new printer, which is it's so awesome. But yeah, I had a lot of fun doing these, and hopefully they were effective, but just something a little different.
I have questions. Like, did you mount, like, you mounted those on what kind of board?
Well, you can see if I do it this way, you can wait, hold on.
There you go.
Okay, so
it's like a card
yeah, it's
stock?
like spongy tape, or just I took sheets of foam core and cut them down and glued them together to kind of give it some.
That's great.
So
nice.
There's that one, and then of course the Making Comics one, same deal. You know,
they were really fun to look at in person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So hopefully that got some attention, but where's the?
Yeah, I would say it did.
But again, just splitting it down the center, and I don't know. I'm curious. I'm curious to get your opinions on kind of what, if there was any takeaways you had as far as what was selling, what people were interested in. But for the first part of the con, I mean, the Making Comics books did really well for me. And at the beginning of the con, that's all I was selling, and it kind of made me think, oh man, no one really likes my comic. They just like these, but.
What am I going to do with all this money?
well, the thing, and I think the reason why those sold so well, because it was a comic centric, show, and a lot of people, I'm sure there were tons of also exhibitors that may have stopped by, and and also it's all ages. So no matter what level you are as far as getting into comics, there's like a workbook for you that'll help you, create comics or whatever. So those did really well, but it was at the point where I was just like, oh man, no one's buying my comic. But at the end of the show, it pretty much all evened out, because then things started to tick up with the Young and the Dead sales and everything. So
I know what you mean. It's like if I do a show and I'm selling way more prints and art than I am comic books, I feel a certain way about it. Yeah. And honestly, never the other way. If I sell way more comics than I do prints, I don't care. But if I do sell more prints, it's like, because so much more work goes into creating comic books. Yeah. Like, like the print game is crazy because I can take, 1 to 4 hours to do like a quick print, and like that'll sell like 100 times over. And like the cost of how much it costs to print them,
Your
and then what
return
I'm
is so
selling
much
them
higher.
for
Yeah.
is so much higher. The time is way less. The return is so much higher, and they're easier to move and reorder. But the problem is, it's like, I kind of don't give a shit about them, and
Yeah.
like I care about comic books so much that it affects my mood if I don't sell enough of those.
Yeah.
That's why
Yeah, I mean,
I'm
you said it yourself,
excited.
Scott.
I'm
Oh, sorry, go
excited to hear from Scott on this too, because I've been talking about this for years, and I started doing this myself, where I just got tired of selling prints, and I was like, I'm not here to make prints. Like I'm here to promote like comics that I made, and my own thing was like realizing that I was I didn't think I was targeting marketing effectively, because if people came away from my booth and they're like, that guy makes cool posters, they got the wrong message. And so I just got rid of all the prints, anything that wasn't related to comics. And when Scott said he was going to do that, like pare it down,
Yeah.
I've just been like chomping at the bit to figure out like how, like find out how that went. And
Yeah. Well, I'll kind
for
of
you.
I'll give you a little breakdown, but before I do that, I want to just comment on the idea of prints and the whole perceived value thing, because I'm kind of struggling with that right now with the wax packs that I'm doing. Because I'm thinking, well, what should I price these at? And I'm thinking like $15 for a wax pack. And I'm like, but will people pay that? But people will pay $20 for a print, which is basically cost you less than $1.
Yeah.
It's there's no labor or anything that goes into putting it together. So why do I feel like a print has more value than a pack that I've cut out and done all this stuff and put together? Why am I worried about, will people pay $15 for this when they'll pay 20 for a print? I don't know. It's weird.
It's like those retro figures that came out. There's like there's a few different places that do retro figures.
Yeah.
And it's just like they're way smaller, but they cost way more.
Yeah.
There is an audience for it. So I think there's going to be an audience for your trading cards as well. Like just as much as
I think
there
so
are people
too.
that love trading cards from when they were a kid and just brings back fond memories. So I think a certain group will shell that out.
Yeah. But in answer to your earlier question, Josh, I mean, I could definitely see a difference just in the fact, like I said, not having to explain what this whole thing is. And this is a little different show because it was comic focused. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, I did pretty well for a one-day show. I mean, the only other really one-day shows I think I've done, other than some really small ones that weren't anything at all, that didn't. But like if I do like an in-store signing at a comic at a comic store, it was about the same. Maybe I mean I could have made it maybe a little more. It just depends. But the thing is, at those, I'm also doing sketches, and those take a lot more time. I didn't have to sit there and do a sketch or anything to do that. Now, for there are some exceptions for Free Comic Book Day. I can usually do pretty well at a Free Comic Book Day. And even like this year is going to be Free Comic Day plus Star Wars Day at the same time. And I did that once before, and that was a really good day for me. So it kind of depends how that's all being promoted and everything. But I think I did pretty well for a one-day show. I kind of wish I would have exhibited the first year to see what the difference was, because I don't have that comparison. But because I am local and everything, I felt like I did all right. I mean, I still wanted to see it grow, and it wasn't like phenomenal, but it was definitely worth my time.
So out of curiosity, the setup of just doing the books, obviously the wax packs will be added into that too, but like kind of paring it down, do you envision yourself kind of doing that more? Like did it effectively get people to buy more comics rather than prints and other stuff?
I think if all you have is one thing, it's not going to split the, that was my theory, that if I just came with comics or comic related stuff, then that's what people will buy. Now, again, it's kind of anecdotal because this con, even though it wasn't
people
super
are there
well
for
attended,
comics,
those were comic people, where if I did that, I don't know if I did that at a Phoenix Comic Con, I don't know if I do as well as I normally would in the past, but I don't know if I may be done with Phoenix Comic Con. I mean, I haven't done it in a couple years or other than if I was invited or if I was a guest at another booth or something like that. I really haven't done those those things.
That's
If I was
cool.
invited as a guest, I'd probably do it, but I don't know if I'd fork my own money. I don't know, unless I decide to go crazy just into if I start putting these wax packs on Etsy and my site and they do really well, and if I want to produce just a whole bunch and just go there with if I was going to do a Phoenix Comic Con, I might go there with just wax packs and that's it. Because again, it's one thing, it's easy to wrap your head around, and so that depending on what I figure out how that does, that may be something I do, but I don't know.
See, based on that, I'd be curious. These guys who have a lot of like a wide diversity of products. I can't tell. I used to have a variety of things. I used to have prints. I used to have a coloring book, and then I have the comics. So and then sometimes I would sell stickers. So I used to do a thing where there was a variety of merch on my table, lots of different price levels, lots of different types of things, and kind of different things where you had to explain a little bit the difference, which I think you guys are doing a lot. Like you'll have different stories, or you have cassette tapes, or you have different things that you have to explain. I gave it up just because I hated dealing with it. Like there's no practical reason. It's just like, I want to be able to just focus on one particular, I just want to sell books and maybe one other thing like stickers. And I don't want to complicate my table or my life. And that's not necessarily an economic or a business decision. It's just like, it's easier for me.
Mm-hmm.
You guys feel, you guys have been doing a lot of products. Do you think it is easier or harder, or makes no difference if you're trying to sell one thing, like Scott's talking about, wax packs, or a bunch of things? Do you think it matters? I can see an argument for a diversity of products is you're more likely to get someone's interest with something on your table, but I don't know. I'd be curious for your thoughts.
I mean, I'll go first. Yeah, I'll go first because I think there's a kind of another question that I'm almost asking myself here for others is why pare down the prints only to keep cassettes, toys, and trading cards on the table, right? And I think the reason for me is that, I write the comics, but everything else is meant to funnel, right? Like, I mean, we just spent some time talking about how the action, the action figures, they're not only one of the properties, but they also are a reason that people are going to stop. The trading cards I just keep around because I like them and I think they're cool, and I also think they have a funneling effect where a lot of people will show up and start looking at the trading cards and then buy a comic as part of the result. Not all of them do, but okay, that's fine. Then I'll take that money. And for the cassettes, I mean, again, I've been making music for 30 plus years. I've been writing comics for, a dozen, something like that. And they're soundtracks to the comic. So, like that's something that I don't really spend a lot of time talking about, and probably could figure out a way to do more of that. But they're all soundtracks to the comic, so it's like they serve a purpose on their own, and they also serve a funneling effect. And, like, I know there was some activity in the chat, including what you just mentioned, what you just threw up there, but it's like the nice thing about cassettes and about 3D printed figures is there are people who, and Scott has seen this, right? Like, I can't explain how this works, but maybe like it'll be a total of like 3 customers across every 2 shows. They'll just show up and go like, you have cassettes? And then they'll just buy everything. Or they'll buy like 3 of them or something like that because they love cassettes. They love collecting cassettes. Look, I collect cassettes, right? And the reason I started doing cassettes was that I was collecting them. And like, this is a great example. I bought this cassette on Bandcamp. I haven't opened it yet. I just listened to it digitally. So it becomes an artifact, but it's still a cool physical artifact. And it's like, vinyl is awesome. I mean, you can see I have vinyl behind me, but vinyl is expensive.
Yeah, it's expensive to press too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Josh, you said it, right? Like, and if you think it's expensive to buy, you should try to make it. Where cassettes, you can print up 50 of them at a reasonable cost and experiment with like all the music and stuff you want to do. So, I think, Gary, I like it because it's either something that I want to put out there in the world like cassettes, or it's something they all have a funneling effect and bring it back to the comics and the writing, which is where I want it to be, as opposed to a lot of the print stuff, which like I didn't even do. Right. And at least this way, it's kind of stuff that either funnels or kind of is something I've done or something that can get people to talk about the comics. It's just one degree of separation to get back to the comics.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what you do, Keith? This comment is that, I mean, with your music, do you kind of indicate what each one goes with, or?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Scott, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yeah. My reasoning, well, number one, I touched on it a little bit earlier, the financial aspect. So, if Keith and I are traveling for shows, I need to make as much money as possible to justify going to Arizona, Las Vegas, wherever. And so it's a selling point, and it's an attention grabber. So people see my booth, like, because I have the banner up pretty high, they'll see it from 30 feet away, right? So you get that 30. And then I'll have usually kind of like these towers that frame my booth, and that gives you kind of the 10, and then they come in for the 2, right? So I do hit those aspects from it. And then I fart, and then so they get 4 of the 5. And so yeah, exactly. And I just
that
have like
that extra convention ambience.
It's free, baby. It's all free.
He'll do anything.
And I have like a spray gun, and I missed them in the face.
Whatever.
Yeah, he'll just tell to someone like, lick my face and taste my sweat. Yeah. I think it's weird, but
I don't even charge more for it.
It's all free.
We're approaching the 90-minute mark, but is there anything that people wanted to touch on briefly before we close things out? Because I know there was a lot to get to, and we got so many people. But if there's anything about the show that we didn't cover that you want to get in real quick, now's the time.
And Keith, maybe not. I'll leave it to you if you want to talk about it. But Keith and I had an interesting conversation about customers who come by and they see they're familiar with your work. Keith, do you remember? They look at it and they're like, "Oh yeah," and you say like, "Hey, I've got a new book out," and they're like, "Cool," and then they keep walking.
Yeah, I mean,
and how to take. Now,
I'll be quick about it because
please, because I think it's a useful conversation
I think it was very eye-opening, Gary, and I will say I've recounted that conversation multiple times since we had it, because and this ties to something Scott and I have said, so I had a fan come up to the booth and they said, "Oh my God, Kadoja, like I have volume 1 of this. I love Kadoja." And then I said, "Oh, okay, well that's awesome. If you love it, then I have volume 2 and 3. And they said, oh, okay, interesting. And then they gave it a cursory look and then walked away. And that was it. So I told Gary, it's like, I think the way I prefaced it, Gary, is I said, that's kind of my worst kind of sale or my worst kind of encounter. Cause now it's like, so did you not like it? You know, but the advantage I have here is that I know the guy just said, I love Kadoja. And so Gary, you kind of opened my eyes to this idea of there are some things, and we can't explain these things. I've got records back here that are like this. I have my own comics that are like this. I just described the Dune book series like this. If you have one, you're happy. You don't need others, right? And so that was what Gary's idea
honestly,
was.
arguably, if you have 3, you're less happy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, so I was viewing it as like maybe an indictment of like, the level of the skill on display. But
yeah,
a lot of people, they read it, they enjoyed it. It's a giant monster thing. They don't really need subsequent giant monster things. They read the one, they bought the one, and it made them happy. And Gary actually introduced it by saying there's bands that he really likes, and he bought one album, and there are other albums, but you have the one and you're good. And so I think, and you said it yourself, Gary, and I agree. Like, I can't explain how this works. I can't explain why I enjoyed the first Dune book and don't need any more, and I also can't explain why there are bands where every time they make a record, I need it. Right. But it's just kind of the way it works. Right. And I think that ties to you. Right. Like it's about your sensibility at some point. So, if you're the kind of person that likes giant monsters, but loves giant monsters, then one volume might be enough for you.
Yeah.
And the other thing, The other thing too is a lot of times in an area like that too, it might be a guy who just burnt through all his cash at the con and was like, dude, I loved Kadoja, and just wanted to let you know that because he loved
Yeah.
it, and he doesn't have the money for it. So he's like, oh man, like, okay, cool. And then walks away. And maybe a next con a year from now, that guy comes and buys all your stuff. Because I've been in that position at cons before where I don't have the budget, but I want to stop by booths of like people I'm a fan of. So I'll get like something really small, or sometimes I can't get anything. But it's like that. So there's that too to kind of keep in mind too. I'd say
you can make assumptions all day, but you never know what's going on in somebody else's head or their reasoning. It could be a myriad of factors that have nothing to do with you or your work.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And like that, and that was my main thing was like, first of all, I can think of a million examples, like Keith said, where times where I watched a season of a show or bought an album or read one book, a series or whatever, and was satisfied and never felt the urge to go back, never felt it. And it wasn't an indictment. It's just for whatever reason, didn't ignite it. But then the other thing, I talked about it with Mary a little bit after too, because it was like, what do you think it is? And what we were kind of clumsily feeling around was sometimes you try something that's outside your lane, your normal lane, whatever it is. So like someone might, I'm just coming up with a random example. This is not real, but someone might say like, you really should check out this punk band. And I'm not a punk person, and like, I'll listen to the album and I think like, this is awesome, but it hasn't converted me. Like, I'm not going to go and now I'm into punk. Now I need all, it's just like, yeah, that was pretty cool. But it's because it's not my thing. It doesn't stick. And I think sometimes that's the phenomenon too, is they liked it. They're happy they experienced it, but you sort of convince them to give it a try and they like it, but it's still not their thing.
Did you ever check out any of the hip hop stuff when we did the thing with Jim?
That's actually a perfect example. Like, I think I really gave it. I don't know if you guys watched, but we did top 5 hip hop albums. And I feel very ignorant about hip hop. It's something that just kind of passed me by, and I never really got a good introduction, so I just don't know a lot about it. But I know a lot of people I really know and love hip hop, and I've always felt like I'm missing out. Like I wish I kind of had a good accessible entry point. So I sat in this top 5 video while 3 people talked about their favorite top 5, their top 5 hip hop albums, and I'm sitting there making notes. I'm like, I better go listen to this. I better go listen to this. And I gave it for like a couple days. I was like hopping around through them and listening, and it just,
I get it.
It's just how it moves you, right?
But I haven't given up hope.
Music that's for fancy whites, and there's music that's not, so
maybe I'm just too fancy.
Some people just can't ever get to enter the Wu-Tang, and that's
that's true.
That they'll have to live with that, right? So
I love it. Thinking of that, just like one last thing with that is there's also those moments where like I love Radiohead, right? Big fan of Radiohead. I think most people do like Radiohead, but that's one of those bands I'll buy everything they do. Tom York does a solo thing, I'll do it. It's like this year where I found The Smile, and they've like done like 3 albums, and I'm like, great. So there's also those scenarios too, where somebody might be the person who's like, they are engaged, everything about it, and then they're reminded 4 years later, like, oh yeah, there's like sequels to this, and I love that, and I have that happen all the time with art too. And I think it's a good reminder for us to not forget what it's like to be consumers of art too when we're selling art, because it's very personal to us. But when we're buying stuff, it's like, it's not unusual to like buy like 2 in a series of books, and there's 5 out there, and then maybe a year later you get the 3rd, so yeah.
I've had that with fans of my books on Kickstarter, and I'll be like, man, I haven't seen this one fan or these couple of fans, like, oh, where'd they go? Oh man, I guess I lost them. And then like 2 Kickstarters later, they'll pop back up and maybe buy all the stuff that they didn't that they missed out on, So sometimes it's just a financial aspect. Maybe they didn't see it or they forgot, like you said.
Maybe the backlog.
One good point too is that I've a lot of what I was talking about here is all post-pandemic, right? And
Yeah.
you know, I can get it. You know, like the comment that I made before is that before the pandemic, I'd have a lot of people that would come up at shows and be like, sure, I'll take all three of Kadoja or whatever. And that just doesn't happen nearly as often post-pandemic. And I think it's, you know, people are watching their money, or they want to have more of a sampling and go less whole hog or whatever it's going to be, right? It's all personal, and you know, who knows, right? All you can do is make good stuff and feel comfortable about it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love it.
absolutely.
Yeah, we can probably end on that. I like that. So, yeah, so I guess unless there's any last things, but I think that was our last thing to go around. So we'll kind of we're gonna go around the room again, not introduce ourselves, but close things out. Tell everyone where they can find us. This time we'll start with Corey. Corey. Oh, Corey's not listening.
You said this time we're going to start with. I thought we were going to go in a different order. No, yeah. So you can find my stuff at CoreyCare.com. I am writing a book in the public, and so there's no drafts, there's no edits. I'm putting scenes out as they come out, and so jump onto the email newsletter at CoreyCare.com/email and check out the videos that I'm doing on YouTube, which will teach you how to make significantly better images than you are currently making.
All right, on to Josh.
Awesome. Yeah. If you guys like indie comics, you should check out Two Stories in Jacob's Apartment. They're both two very awesome indie cool kid comics. So if you're a cool indie kid, you should pick them up. And then other than that, Joshua Kemble and on the YouTubes and all that stuff, where I stream working on Not Death But Love, the graphic novel about Elizabeth Barrett Browning and Robert Browning that I'm about at the nightmarish halfway point of. So, yeah.
All right, Scott Lost.
You could find me at Scott Lost on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. The link, go to Instagram, the best place to get my stuff. You'll see the Kickstarter link for Second Shift Doorways. So that's starring 14 different guest stars, all indie creations, and one public domain creation. And so that's going until April 1st. So check that out. Second Shift Doorways on Kickstarter.com. Just go to my social media and you'll find links there. I'm posting it all over the social medias.
Yeah, that looks really cool, and I love hearing the little behind the scenes of how you kind of pulled that off, and seeing some of the pictures and stuff on your socials and stuff. It looks really, really awesome.
Yeah, man, it was a real fun project, and it's crazy how it worked out, and I'm looking forward to do part 2.
Cool, awesome. Keith.
Yeah, you can find me actually on Instagram. I'm Keith_Invader, but I'm pretty sure that just remember this face, and that's going to be my damn picture. So Keith Foster, that'll link it up, or Keith_Invader. And then of course I have the website KeithRFoster.com if you want to check out my books. So follow me on Instagram if you like, Keith Invader, or find my website KeithRFoster.com.
Yeah, and I'll add, don't forget to check out Keith and Scott on the Making Comic podcast. If you like this kind of show that we're doing here, definitely subscribe to the podcast. I think, is it next week that the episode that
yes
that I was okay. So
yes,
if you
the
subscribe
much
now and
Scott Circlin episode,
so I'll be on next Monday. I think you drop on Mondays
every Monday. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, so
and we actually have a Patreon together. It's the Making Comics podcast. So it's patreon.com/Making Comics podcast. And we have you on a bonus episode that is already up. So
cool. Yeah, that was
if you
fun
go there and you're willing to drop $5 a month, or just for this month, if you just want to hear that and all the other stuff we have there, you can do that. Scott takes us behind the scenes with his wax packs, and we talk about the process of that.
We go deep,
and you get to hear my bad Stan Lee impersonation. So
it was
actually
great.
Quite good. Yeah,
it was quite good. I enjoyed it. I was in my brain. I was like, should I attempt to do a Jack? I'm all, no. It's just
that was so good.
We got to do a parody. Yeah, we got to do a parody of the how to make. Oh no, that wasn't Jack Kirby. That was oh shoot.
You're thinking how to make comics, the one with like Ditko and
no, it wasn't Ditko.
And then all the like Liefeld. Wasn't Liefeld on that?
No,
series?
there was that, but I'm thinking of the how to make comics the Marvel way.
John Romita Jr. or John Romita?
Sal Buscema.
Okay.
And Stanley, he's all like verbose and everything. And Sal Buscema's like, yeah, that's right, Stan. Yeah, and he just seems so annoyed.
It's like Ed McMahon. Yes.
Yes.
I love it.
All right, Gary.
So you can find me on Instagram, Dinosaurs vs Marsbots, Dinosaurs versus Marsbots. There's a link tree there. Will take you everywhere else, including my YouTube, where videos will probably be starting back up. I would estimate sometime in April, fairly soon. As soon as I get a script done, I'm out of writing mode, then I'm going to probably start off with the videos again. Almost ready to start planning and drawing D versus M number 4. We'll talk about that. And then on the videos, what else? Oh, there's still comics in stock on my Etsy shop, also findable through my link tree.
Yeah, I think there's a link for that in the description, as well as links to Keith and Scott's social media and all of our where you can find us in the description. And yeah, it seems like it's going a lot fast. Maybe just my imagination, but it seems like it's going a lot faster as far as the time from when you released the previous issue to moving on the next one. So I'm excited to see how it's coming together.
Yeah. So yeah, hopefully. My intent is to be drawing this year. As long as I start drawing this year, I'll be able to hit my preferred release date of sometime next year. My intent is to try to get D versus M out every other year. So yeah.
Yeah, and as far as me, you're on my channel, so that's where you can find my YouTube videos. Definitely check out. Oh, Keith, what was the pitch you said? You told me that. Well, as far as the nostalgia stuff, I totally blanked on that.
You take nostalgia, you put your thing down, flip it in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah. Yes, but anyway, I take old ephemera and stuff that you would order from the back of comics and try to figure out, how it worked and if I can create it myself, and then like the wax packs and all that kind of stuff. Check out that, as well as my backlog of how to make comics videos. Also, I have a website, circworks.com, where you can find my digital products that help you make comics. There's links to those comic book workbooks that I talked about. You can find those on Amazon at the link through my website. Also, my comic book, Young and the Dead, a Kids vs. Zombie adventure story in the spirit of Goonies and Night of the Living Dead. And this show we do every single week. Usually we do it on Thursdays, but sometimes, depending on our guests, could be on a Wednesday, like tonight. It can get a little confusing because not only does it appear on different nights, maybe different times, it also kind of flips back around flip it and reverse it between Corey's channel, Josh's channel, and my own channel. So if you want to know exactly what channel we're going to be on, what time, all that stuff, the best way to know that is to join our mailing list. We don't spam you or anything. All we do is about 30 minutes before we go live, we send a newsletter out with a link to show you where you can watch that, because it gets confusing and we try to negate all that confusion. So you just click on that link, and like I said, no spam or anything. We just let you know, because YouTube doesn't always notify people. So with that, I want to thank our guests. I want to thank everyone in the chat. We had a very lively chat. Sorry if we didn't get to your comment. We try to pull as many of those up as possible. But again, we always appreciate you guys watching live and everyone that's watching after the fact. So thank you to you. And we are going to close things out once again with our I was going to say intro, but this time it's an outro. So see you guys next week.
This one goes out to the Artcasters. Ooh, Artcasters! I say you're catching your spell, Artcasters. Catching your spell. Ooh, you're gonna guess that spell. Strike a hell. Whoa!